Governor Mills has allowed dozens of bills to become law without her signature this week. That includes a bill that will require new outdoor lighting on public property across the state to be dimmed at night. The law and act to promote responsible outdoor lighting was passed by the legislature in June. The goal is to help protect wildlife in the outdoors and to improve nighttime conditions in the state. The law means that any outdoor lighting that is installed or replaced after October 1st of this year must be dimmed between 10 p.m. and sunrise or 7 a.m., whichever is earlier. For facilities, offices, activities, and events that are open or continue after 10 p.m., lights must be dimmed 1 hour after the end of operation.